speaker for today. Her name is Dr. Kirsten Oleson. She's an associate professor in the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Management in University of Hawaii, Manoa. Her specialties are ecosystem services, environmental evaluation, policy analysis, decision science, and many more. And enough of the technical stuff. And I have the privilege in working with her for this PMS survey, looking at impacts in socioeconomics and the effects it has in the residents and the tourists. And with all that said, I present to you Dr. Oleson.
Okay, Andrea could give this talk, I have no doubt, but I'll do my best to represent our team. So this has been a collaboration between Pickerick and University of Hawaii. We've had Stanford, a student from Stanford involved, TNC, SPC. So while I'm up here, any one of these people you could talk to about the work that went into this. So our funding source was the National Geographic Pristine Seas project. And this crowd knows the framing of this project was about the Palau National Marine Sanctuary, which the goal is by 2020 to restrict fishing in 20% of the exclusive economic zone. Notably, this does not exclude foreign vessels, ban exports except for some purse seining catch, and finally to invest in locally based pelagic fishery. And when I was invited to start working on this project, I started thinking about, well, what are the socioeconomic impacts of the sanctuary? First, we expect a change in fish supply and price in the domestic market as international vessels exit or reduce their effort and a domestic fishery emerges. Secondly, we expect a change in the number of tourists, hopefully an increase in the number of tourists, potentially attracted by the fact that there is a national marine sanctuary. And third impact that we were concerned with were shifts in the consumed fish quantity and type as we see these shifts in supply and price and tourism. But in order to know whether the National Marine Sanctuary is having impacts, we needed good baseline data on these. And so what we set out to do was to do some primary research to really get at these baseline indicators. So our research questions. Our first research question was, how does fish move through Palau's supply chain from the fisher to the consumer? The second research question was, what is the market demand for reef and pelagic fish? And third and final, will tourists be attracted by and pay more for fish due to the National Marine Sanctuary? So we did three different things. First, we did a value chain analysis where we interviewed suppliers and restaurants, caterers, etc., to get an idea of how fish is moving through the economy. Second, we did a tourist survey where we surveyed 426 tourists of various nationalities, Chinese, Taiwanese, Japanese, Korean, and other US, Australia, European. And then we did a resident survey where across a number of different states, we interviewed 325 residents about their fish consumption and preferences. So we're going to skip right into the results. So the first key result is the offshore supply chain. And so for those of you who can't see the slide, the figure is a network of actors in the supply chain for the offshore pelagic fish. We quantified the current flows along each connection. So for instance, from locally based, locally owned vessels to caterers to residents. So the key points here are that it's a complex distribution network. There are many actors that reported that the supply was inconsistent and unpredictable. And the restaurants are the largest supply chain actor, but prepared food and stores and caterers are not insignificant, and any efforts at managing the supply chain should not ignore those. So now this is a different figure of pretty much the same data. So this slide shows how much of the total pelagic fish that is caught in Palau enters the commercial market, so all of it. Then how much is exported versus consumed in Palau. So notably, about 200 metric tons of pelagic fish is eaten in Palau, and our results indicate that about half of that goes to residents and half to tourists. Looking at the value added along the supply chain, here the figure is for tuna. So the graphic charts the market price of tuna along this supply chain, from fishing companies to stores, markets, caterers, restaurants. Now you note that there's very little price increase along the supply chain. So this basically shows that there's little value added until the preparation at the food market or at the restaurant stage. So this implies that there are opportunities for adding value along the pelagic supply chain, because right now all of the value added is accruing to restaurants. Turning to the reef or nearshore fish, again, the figure this is a graphic that shows the distribution network of nearshore reef fish. And the key messages here are that fishers have a lot of options to sell their fish. But the largest buyer is the central fish market, at least from the data that we have on hand. But other important commercial operators exist. So caterers sell more reef fish than restaurants. And you can't forget the convenience stores and the roadside stands and the prepared food markets, because all of these, while not as much as the caterers, are still a significant part of the commercial supply chain. Now, turning to who eats the reef fish. So this figure shows that only a small portion of reef fish actually enters the commercial market. There's been a lot of talk about tourists' consumption of reef fish and the worry that tourists are eating all of the fish on the reef. So as you can see here, this little slice is what tourists eat compared to the estimate of what locals eat. And notably, this estimate is not ours, it's 2,100. And some data that Phil James from SPC collected in a number of states implies that this is a gross underestimate of the amount of reef fish being eaten and being fished. But we did collect the data on how much tourists are eating, and we found a range of just 36 to about 79 metric tons a year. Just 4% of this total estimated catch is tiny. And what tourists eat is less than what is exported in coolers, which is about 105 metric tons, right? So if we're starting to direct policy at reducing fish consumption, tourists may not be the only target. Okay, so, but let's say we do worry about the reef fish that tourists are eating. Who's eating them? And so we asked this of the tourists, and we see that 50% of the reef fish eaten by tourists is eaten by Chinese tourists. And notably, these data were collected in 2017. So think about the tourism market in 2017. But if we wanted to focus on one nationality, then it would be the Chinese. Encouragingly, everybody likes to eat the tuna and pelagic. So if we need to move them off of reef fish, everybody is already eating the tuna and pelagic fish. And we asked them outright, would you come to Palau if you weren't allowed to eat reef fish? And 94% of tourists said yes. They would come here anyway. So, okay. So turning to the local residents, we found some pretty interesting results. So this graphic shows the proportion of times a respondent answered daily, 3 times a week, weekly, twice a month, to the question, how often do you eat fish? And we were surprised to learn that urban dwellers, we interviewed people in Koror, so those are our urban dwellers, eat reef fish more frequently than people living in peri-urban or rural areas. Now, I would love to get feedback from the audience on why that is, because we've had a hard time interpreting that. It's very counterintuitive to me. Also, urban dwellers buy their fish more often. probably unsurprisingly. But overall, residents rarely buy fish. So the vast majority, our results suggest that the vast majority of fish are either caught or gifted, shared, right? So what does this suggest for our efforts at reef conservation? We should consider non-market opportunities, market mechanisms in reef fish, because the residents are the vast consumers of reef fish, and most of it's being gifted and shared. We may need to think of non-market conservation efforts like behavioral change, messaging, social marketing, etc. Okay. And again, similar graphic here is with the pelagic fish about the value added along the supply chain. And as you note, it's pretty flat. There's really little value added across the actors of the supply chain until you get to these food markets and the restaurants. There we see quite a bit of value added from the preparation. And this is, again, if there's likely opportunity to increase value added along the supply chain, so the economic value of the fish, basically each fish is pumping more money into the economy as it goes through. Okay, so turning back to the tourists, we found that tourists will eat more reef fish if pelagic fish becomes more expensive. And this is a worry because as the supply goes down, the price of pelagic fish is likely to rise. Based on their demands that we elicited from them, a 5% increase in the price of a pelagic fish-based meal would increase the reef fish demand by 10%, right? So this is equivalent to, so a 5% increase in the pelagic meal would increase in the reef-based fish meals demand by about 33,000 reef meals. And this trend persists as the price goes up, so a $10 or $15 increase, etc. So the point is that as pelagic fish supply goes down, people that were eating pelagic could switch to reef fish. Right? But the tourist consumption is relatively small, so we don't have to get too worried, but it could increase the pressure on reef fish. The good news, flip side of this, is that tourists are willing to pay a premium for local, sustainable pelagic fish. As a matter of fact, the tourists across nationalities and incomes said they were willing to pay an extra $10 per meal, so above the base price that they're already paying, for tuna and other pelagic fish that had some local, sustainable brand or label, right? And this premium differed between nationalities and income levels, but we have all of those data, and whether it was tuna or pelagic fish. So a local sustainable pelagic fishery could be labeled, could garner more income, and as a matter of fact, it could actually pull people away from eating reef fish. Right? So you have this pull because they want to eat the local sustainable pelagic, and so they choose that instead of reef fish, so there's substitution. So long as the premium doesn't exceed $10. If it's more than $10, then people won't switch. The good thing is that this is money sitting on the table, right? This is a consumer surplus, as we say in economics. People are willing to pay this, and now it's just up to Palau to design the mechanism to capture that willingness to pay and put it in the local economy. And it could help, depending on how you did this could help fund investment in the domestic fishery. So that's a key lesson. So then the kind of final point that I wanted to bring up from this research is that many tourists still don't know about the PMS. So we've got some marketing to do. And again, this was done in 2017, so there's already a big difference. Something's going right with Korea, because half of the Koreans who were visiting said they knew about it, but and the US is pretty high, it's close to 45%. But other nations, people said they didn't know about the PMS before they came here. But the ones who did know about the PMS, 43% of those said it was really important to their decision to come here. Right? So for the ones who were made aware, it was an attraction. So now we know there's more awareness raising that needs to happen. But once it does, it looks like it's important to people's decision to come here. what are the key takeaways? First of all, I can't read it because I don't have my glasses. Okay, there's complex supply chains, but minimal value added, both for the pelagic and the nearshore fish. There are opportunities there. The supply of pelagic fish, we now have a number, 200 metric tons a year. So now we know what we need to, that's the current demand, what a domestic fishery would need to bring into the market here, right? But a lot of the actors in the supply chain complained that this was currently inconsistent and unpredictable, leading them, for instance, to import mahi-mahi from Mexico to feed their guests in restaurants, right? Which is horrible. Tourists consume less reef fish than what's exported and a fraction of what's eaten by residents. Urban dwellers consume reef fish more frequently than rural and peri-urban dwellers, which suggests that you can basically concentrate your efforts on the people in Karor and in peri-urban areas, but if you really wanted to affect reef fish consumption. Tourists will eat more reef fish if the price of a pelagic meal increases, so this is something to watch out for. But they're willing to pay this premium for locally sourced tuna, and we need to get this up and running. And then lastly, though most tourists were not yet aware of the PMS, many who were said that it was important to their decision. So this speaks to the need for the awareness-raising campaign for the PMS. And that's what I have for you today. I'd be happy to take any questions that folks may have.
How did you address Laos traditional customs where a lot of fish is going straight to a custom and the value of that fish is much greater than it would be in a restaurant?
Yeah, so that we did interview residents about how much fish they ate for custom, right, or for we looked at it from two directions. One, we asked residents about the fish that they were eating and the reasons, right, so custom, et cetera. And we interviewed all the caterers to get the flow of fish from the commercial side. So we kind of had data from the different sides, the volume from residents that they said they ate in these custom events. We got estimates of how much fish is served at the custom events and looked at how many of like funerals and things like that happen. So we kind of triangulated that. So we tried to capture both the flow of fish that came from reef fish and pelagic fish that came both from the commercial and the non-commercial supply.
Did you do targeted interviews with fishermen who actually supply to the customs?
Yeah, we also so two things. One, yes, we did some interviews with fishers, and two, SPC, so Phil James, did a full-on fisher survey. So they went in and they interviewed all the fishers. So I did not present his data in this, but we used it to inform some of the numbers and to make sure, to triangulate, to make sure that we're saying the same orders of magnitude. Yeah.
What's your assumptions of an urban dweller? Because even though Palauans live in Karor, they have a network of ability to get fish when they need it because they're from all the bubble.
Well, yeah, and that's what we saw. So we saw that urban dwellers eat fish more frequently, but I can go back to the slide, but they're still the vast majority of the, and they buy fish more frequently than the peri-urban and urban, but the vast majority of the fish that they get is not through the market. Nonetheless, they're still getting it through custom, through sharing, gifting, and even fishing themselves. Yeah.
One more. A lot of fishermen are now being approached by buyers right on the docks. They don't go through any chains, and they get a high price for fish straight from these buyers.
Right.
I mean, I have firsthand knowledge of that. So they're just going straight to the docks to get their fish. They're not going through markets or anything.
Yeah, so if those buyers were the restaurants or the caterers, we interviewed them and asked them from whom they were buying the fish. And so sometimes they bought it through the fish market, sometimes they went to PITI or something like that, but a lot of times they bought it direct from the fisher. And so because we interviewed people at different points in the supply chain in order to get at the numbers from both sides, that's why you see ranges, because we did different ways to try to get the numbers, but we hopefully captured the fact that they're buying direct from fishers. Yeah, Javi.
So I have a question about your estimates of commercial reef landings. I guess it's annual, 2,000 metric tons.
Not my estimate, but yes.
Yeah. And the breakdown is about half is commercial, half is not. But then you say most of it is consumed by the locals, and most of it is not being purchased. So how do you reconcile those two?
So this here, like we have, so the flow here that we're showing is that about 2,000 metric tons are of reef fish are caught in Palau's waters, and that's a really old estimate. It's by Gillette, right? So we just take that as a given. There's information actually from SPC's study that we hate to extrapolate, right? But that suggests that it's a fraction of what's actually coming off of the reef, okay? Or like a third or a quarter of what those estimates would suggest. So then our data explicitly focused on what the tourists were eating and the export numbers, right? And everything else is a derivation of that number.
So the breakdown is from Gillette's study?
Yes, yeah, the breakdown is from Gillette's study. That is a huge data gap, which I think we're working on, right? Of trying to help really refine like what's coming off the reef and where it goes, right? We focused on how much is being consumed by the tourists, and we do have numbers, you know, of what the residents are consuming from our resident survey. I trust them honestly less than I do the numbers from the tourist survey at this point, but.
I have another one.
Yes.
So you look at the willingness to pay a higher price for tuna or street to reef fish for tourists. Do you look into that for locals?
Yes, we did. We did a similar, it's called a choice experiment, looking at the willingness to pay for different proteins for residents, right? So it was different than the tourists. The tourists, we asked them to trade between tuna, other pelagic, reef fish, and local sustainable. For the tourists, thanks to Andrea's help and blood, sweat, and tears, we designed it to be about reef fish, pelagic fish, chicken, pork, canned meat, spam, and other protein sources, because we also wanted to get at kind of some of the switches that are happening into imported foods, right? All of the resident survey data we got about last week, and so a lot of those data are sitting with a statistician to analyze them. But you know, we did see substitution depending on with prices and switching if the reef fish. And one thing to say is that I really only trust the results there for the urban population, because the choice experiment was designed so we asked people, well, if you were to go to the store and you would have to make choices, right? And with the rural population, I think they really struggled with that hypothetical, because as we know from the other data, they're not going to the store to buy fish. So I don't think we can trust the results for the rural population, but for the core population, I can send you what we have so far to get your interpretation. But I didn't present them because I don't trust them well enough to do it in a public talk yet. But we did do it. Yeah.
If you had a sustainable reef or pelagic fishery and you said there would be a potential increase as a price surplus or a consumer surplus, that's the word, could you get a sense of how, you suggested that fishermen could be earning more at prices the restaurants are earning, for example, that could trickle down. Would you get a sense of what a fisherman could be earning in terms of additional income if they switch to a sustainable practice?
So the question is like, how much would the fisher get of those $10?
Yeah.
I think that's going to really depend on the design and the relationship with restaurants. So I know there's been a lot of work of connecting fishers directly with restaurants, like Anna was just talking about, and getting restaurants to commit to not capturing all of that surplus for themselves, right? And passing some of that down the supply chain all the way to fishers. So depending on how you organized it, the portion could be very small, up to none, to the $10, right? Oh yeah, one more, sorry.
Yeah, so it seems like the assumption is that our reefs are being overfished currently.
I make no such assumption.
There's a picture of a cute little fish that says, "Eat pelagic."
Right, so that was actually a picture that came straight from, so there's been a long-standing discussion amongst some of the marine scientists worried about the consumption of reef fish and trying to pull tourists towards pelagic fish, right? And locals, right? So this is actually a picture from Andrew Weddick.
It's from Pompeii.
Pompeii.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
About 3 days ago.
Right, so and it's an example, I think, of a social marketing, like an awareness raising campaign, which is why I threw it up there. Like, you know, this is a non-market way. If we were to think about trying to move people away from eating reef fish, it's not going to be through necessarily just increasing the price of reef fish in the markets, because that's not what's driving consumption.
But the assumption that you would need to do a campaign to try to change behavior, right, is based on the fact that the behavior is having a negative impact on that ecosystem. And so I guess the question is, like, at what point are we going to be able to have data that can give us a sense of, you know, the fact that we're eating too many tons of reef fish and we need to cut back, and even get to a point when we know which reefs are being overfished or species, and then we can begin to have some informed conversations about, you know, how do we then direct campaigns to try to change social behavior. Yeah, I don't know, like maybe Javier.
No,
Yeah.
Wait, pressing the mic for
I'm
this
supposed to
one.
be looking at this.
I know the study's not ready yet, the results, but yeah.
So I guess it's a general understanding that the reef stocks in Palau are being compromised for a few decades already. It changes depending on the species, but that's a general understanding. And every fisher you talk to who's been fishing for a few decades will tell you things are not as they used to be. But there's a trend that is not just in Palau, in all the islands now, which you will see the same. More details, hopefully will come in the future. Yeah, I get some time. But yeah, I think you can say that generally it's been overfished, even though the word overfishing is something controversial, but I'll be happy to say it. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kirsten, for that talk. And we have another short talk about talking about how we can continue this kind of work and to be able to use the result to help inform management. So maybe I'll say something in Palawan before. So, I'll give you a comprehensive presentation. Professor Kirsten Oleson ng University of Hawaii. Logro Belao Palau International Tourism Center, Palau National Marine Sanctuary Office, Kirsten Shees. El Lomes was en maral information as of el mine, es el help pergi na kung mapok el Kamat Maclean or management at Palau National Marine Sanctuary. So, margi ora effort was continue ay giluryo, magi partner of Stanford University Center for Ocean Solutions. Center for Ocean Solutions, Stanford University, hindi white claim kasi kada marami provide solutions. Hindi ito sa problems, kada marami work towards solutions. Marami information na respect, kasi they make a good decisions to address a problem that we face. So, tinagagi ng atiyang ina-start traveler, mga belaw, ginamitra at Pilipur Odor, Palau National Marine Sanctuary, mga ministers kabaw, i-direct ko Mitra President, and Mitra Board, makalulod for the next few years. Tigalong tira Center of Ocean Solutions sa Stanford University, ang Theo Miseli, kang professor, director and co-director of the Center for Ocean Solutions, hanggang director scientist, mga lugin scientist, suba fisheries, small scale fisheries, impact climate change sa karger, hanggang director po dalalog director na niya naging chief lead sa director, co-director, hanggang scientist, hanggang policy, lawyer, employee experience, rin po na policy. So, tiya lulura, all researchers, director for other policy, managers, role address, provide the information sa LOSPE, address again problems ng management bila soalan mo. Makmong mo di moas grafio, may already give a overview te ilulyo, may areas te collaboration of the Stanford University, may University of Hawaii ang Kirsten Oleson, mga public school ng University of Hawaii. Makalulol, mas marang ay pura mo focus at ilulyo. So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. We're very excited to be here as part of the collaboration between Stanford University and PICRIC and other partners in University of Hawaii and other institutions that started last winter. And our goal is to support decision makers in the implementation and management of the Palau National Marine Sanctuary, leading to its implementation in 2020. 2020 is also a big year because Palau is going to host our ocean conference. There are also other international events, the UN Ocean Conference, the Convention for Biological Diversity, Convention of the Parties. And so it's really a big year and a great opportunity to have Palau lead the way as an example of setting a path to reconcile conservation and human development. And with the sanctuary establishing a large MPAs that is for conservation of ocean ecosystems, but also for ocean users and people. So the program that we have started, the collaborative work, is designed around we call them technical teams, three groups that are going to focus on the pelagic fisheries, on the reef fisheries, and then on the socioeconomic aspects that Dr. Oleson described, as well as consideration of human health, how the shift in diets that might occur in the future might impact human health or support better health, public health. So our goal is to really support decision makers by providing a set of options, and then the analysis that allow an assessment of what might be the benefits and the risks for each options, as well as establishing the monitoring and research that is needed to track progress and to adapt to future changes. So we see this as a long-term collaboration, hopefully for many years to come, and we're very excited to be here. Thank you.
Questions?
So do you have some solutions?
Well, no, we have just started, and we're actually a smaller team that represents the larger group that is going to meet here in February. And so really we are now, our first step is that studies and proposed solutions exist. No? There's been some work, and so our first task really is to start from what's there and pull together these pieces, these studies, the analysis that already exist, evaluate the different options that have been proposed, hopefully come up with new ones, and really start the work of synthesis, of taking stock of where we are, what we know, what we need to know moving forward. So hopefully a few months or a year from now we will have a full assessment. But it's really, our goal is not to advocate for any particular solution, but to lay out what different scenarios might exist. What might happen if this is done, or this other alternative path is taken. So really inform the different solutions, and then it's up to the decision makers to determine what is the path that I think that allow us to take. For that, thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for our research talk. Roman Sula Lawrence était à la live radio. Roman Sula la sava e Marga était à nos live était à research talk Big Range. Thank you.